The hospital silence. The night was heavy. The air outside thick with rain, but inside the hospital everything felt strangely still. The hallways were quiet except for the faint beeping of machines and the soft shuffle of nurses moving from room to room. Keanu Reeves walked slowly down the long corridor, his head bowed, his steps heavier than they had ever felt before. He was not here as the world knew him, not as the actor people admired, not as the man who carried kindness in silence. He was here as a father, and in his heart fear was louder than anything else. Inside room 207, his little boy lay in the hospital bed. His skin was pale, his small frame swallowed by the large white sheets. Wires and tubes connected him to machines that blinked and hummed, machines that kept hope alive even when strength was slipping away. Keanu paused at the doorway, his hand tightening against the frame. He had faced storms in his life, tragedies that had broken him down and forced him to rebuild, but nothing compared to the sight of his son lying so still, so fragile. A nurse glanced at him softly, giving a small nod before leaving the room. Keanu stepped inside, his breath unsteady, his eyes fixed only on the boy. "Hey, champ," he whispered gently, pulling the chair closer to the bed. "Daddy's here." The boy opened his eyes slowly, faint but bright enough to meet his father's gaze. A weak smile tugged at his lips. "I knew you'd come." Keanu swallowed hard, forcing a smile of his own. "Of course I came. There's no place I'd rather be." For a moment there was only silence between them. The boy's small hand reached out, trembling, and Keanu took it carefully in his own. It was warm, but too light, too fragile for a child so young. "Daddy?" the boy whispered, his voice faint, almost like a breath. "Can I ask you something?" Keanu leaned closer, brushing his son's hair gently away from his forehead. "Anything?" The boy's lips trembled, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Why does it hurt so much? Why can't I be like the other kids?" The question cut through Keanu like a blade. He had no answer, no explanation that could ease the pain of a child who only wanted to play, to run, to live without the shadow of illness. He bit back the ache in his throat and whispered, "You are stronger than you know. Stronger than me. Stronger than anyone." The boy shook his head weakly, a tear slipping down his cheek. "I don't feel strong." Keanu kissed his son's forehead softly, his own tears threatening to fall. "That's okay. You don't have to feel strong, you just have to keep holding on and I'll hold on with you." The boy closed his eyes for a moment, breathing slowly. Then, as though summoning every ounce of courage left inside him, he whispered, "Daddy, I don't want toys, I don't want games, I just want one thing, and if I get it, I'll be the happiest kid in the world." Keanu's heart clenched. "What is it, my boy?" The boy opened his eyes again, his voice trembling as he spoke the words that shattered his father's heart. "I just want to live long enough to see you smile again, really smile. Not the smile you wear for me, but the smile you've lost." The silence that followed was unbearable. Keanu tried to hold his composure, but his chest broke open with grief. He turned his face away for a moment, his shoulders trembling, his hand tightening around his son's, and for the first time in years, Keanu Reeves cried. Silent, aching tears that filled the room with a sorrow. No fame, no wealth, no words could ever heal. The vow, the night stretched on, and the rain outside tapped gently against the hospital windows. The world felt far away, but inside room 207 time seemed to move differently. Slow and heavy, like every second carried the weight of eternity. Keanu sat beside his son, holding his small hand, his heart aching with every shallow breath the boy took. When his son finally drifted into sleep, Keanu leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. His mind was a storm of memories. He remembered his own childhood, the loneliness, the moments he had felt invisible. He remembered friends he had lost too soon, faces he could never forget. And he remembered the many nights he had smiled for. The world but carried sorrow silently in his heart, but this was different. This was not his own pain. This was his son's life hanging in fragile balance, and the helplessness cut deeper than anything he had ever known. He stood quietly, walking to the small window where the city lights blurred through streaks of rain. His reflection stared back at him, tired eyes, unshaven face, lines carved from grief. He whispered softly to himself, words no one else could hear. I can't lose him. Not him. Not now. Behind him, the boy stirred, whispering in his sleep. Daddy, don't go. Keanu turned instantly, his chest tightening. He sat back down, brushing his son's hair gently. I'm not going anywhere, champ. I promise. The boy's fingers clutched weakly at his father's hand, even in sleep, as though afraid he would vanish if he let go. In that moment, Keanu felt something shift inside him. Grief had always been his companion, but tonight it was replaced by something else, something stronger. Resolve. He whispered the vow quietly, so softly that only the walls of the hospital room bore witness. I will fight for you. I will give everything I have, everything I am, to keep you alive. You will not face this alone. I swear it. The hours passed slowly until morning light seeped through the blinds. Doctors entered, their expressions grave but professional. Tests had been run overnight, and now they carried charts and quiet voices. Mr. Reeves, one of them said carefully, we need to talk about your son's condition. It's complicated. His heart is weaker than we expected. We have options, but they're risky. Without intervention, the future will be uncertain. Keanu's jaw tightened, his chest heavy with fear. What kind of intervention? The doctor sighed. A surgery, difficult, high risk. But it could give him a chance at a future. Lily, the nurse who had been kind to them the night before, stood quietly at the doorway, her eyes full of empathy. She had seen families break under the weight of choices like this. Keanu looked at his son, still sleeping peacefully, unaware of the storm that surrounded him. His small chest rose and fell with each fragile breath, and the machines hummed like guardians keeping him tethered to life. What are the risks? Keanu asked, his voice low but steady. Significant, the doctor admitted. There's no guarantee, but without it, he may not have much time. The words pierced like knives. Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, gathering strength. He remembered his son's whisper from the night before. I just want to see you smile again. How? Could he smile if the boy was gone? He opened his eyes, his voice firm. Do it. Whatever it takes. Give him that chance. The doctors nodded, their expressions serious. Preparations would begin soon. When the room was quiet again, Keanu sat back beside his son, taking his small hand in his own. You hear me, champ? We're going to fight this. Together. His son stirred faintly, opening his eyes just enough to whisper, Promise. Keanu squeezed his hand gently, his own tears brimming. Promise. And as the morning sun broke through the clouds outside, KeanuReeves knew that his vow was no longer just words. It was the lifeline he would cling to, no matter how dark the storm ahead became. The night before the surgery, the day passed in fragments, nurses moving in and out, machines beeping steadily, doctors explaining procedures in careful tones. But for Keanu, time felt unreal. Every tick of the clock was another reminder that his son's life was hanging on a thread, and that thread would be tested tomorrow. That evening, the rain had stopped, but the hospital hall still smelled faintly of dampness. Keanu sat close to the bed, holding his son's small hand as though his touch alone could keep him anchored. His boy was awake now, his voice fragile but curious. Daddy, why are the doctors whispering so much? Are they scared? Keanu forced a gentle smile, though his heart twisted. No, champ, they're not scared. They're just making sure they do everything right for you. They want you to be strong again. The boy studied him carefully, his small eyes searching his father's face. But you're scared. The words hit hard. Keanu looked down, unable to hide the truth. Yes, he admitted softly. I am. Because I love you so much, and I don't want anything to happen to you. The boy reached out weakly, brushing his father's face with his tiny fingers. Then don't be scared. I'll fight, I promise. Keanu swallowed hard, blinking back the tears. You're braver than anyone I know. As night fell, the nurses dimmed the lights, leaving the room in soft shadows. Keanu thought his son was asleep, but suddenly the boy whispered, Daddy, if something happens tomorrow, will you still think of me? Keanu's heart stopped. Don't say that, he whispered. Nothing is going to happen to you. You'll be fine. You'll come back stronger and we'll have all the time in the world. But his son's voice trembled. Just promise me, if I don't wake up, you won't be sad forever. You'll smile again. That's all I want. Keanu couldn't hold it anymore. The tears fell silently down his face, dripping onto their joined hands. He bent down, pressing his forehead gently against his son's. Don't you ever say that again. You will wake up. You will see me smile again. I promise. You. The boy closed his eyes, comforted by his father's voice, and slowly drifted into sleep. Later that night, Keanu left the room for the first time in hours. He walked down the empty corridor until he reached the small hospital chapel. Candles flickered softly against the walls, and the air was thick with quiet prayers. He sat in the back pew, his hands trembling, his chest heavy with grief. He had never been one to pray loudly, but tonight he whispered into the stillness. Whoever is listening, and don't take him from me. Take my strength, my years, my breath, but not his. Please, not him. His voice broke, his shoulders shaking as he bent forward, his face hidden in his hands. It was the cry of a father stripped of all defenses, the cry of a man who had carried loss before, but could not bear it again. After some time, a soft voice pulled him back. Mr. Reeves. It was Lily, the kind nurse. She had seen him leave and followed quietly. She stood near the door, her eyes full of quiet compassion. He'll need you strong tomorrow, she said gently. Let your tears fall tonight, but tomorrow, give him your courage. Keanu nodded slowly, wiping his face, though the ache in his chest remained. When he returned to the room, his son was still sleeping, his small chest rising and falling with each fragile breath. Keanu sat back in the chair, took his son's hand again and whispered, I'll be here when you wake, no matter what. And though the night was heavy with fear, somewhere deep inside, a spark of hope remained. Small, fragile, but alive. The longest hours, the morning arrived too soon. Keanu hadn't slept at all, not even for a minute. He sat by his son's bedside all night, holding the small hand that clung to him even in dreams. When the first rays of sunlight slipped through the blinds, the hospital room filled with a quiet tension, as though the walls themselves knew what was coming. Nurses entered softly, preparing the boy for surgery. Machines beeped steadily, their sounds louder than usual in the silence of Keanu's heart. His son opened his eyes faintly, his voice no more than a whisper. Is it time? Keanu nodded gently, forcing a smile. Yes, champ, but you're not alone. I'll be right here when you wake up. The boy tried to smile, though his lips trembled. Then I'm not scared. Keanu bent down and kissed his forehead, his tears hidden in the crook of his arm. That's my boy. When the doctors wheeled the bed out, Keanu walked beside it until the double doors of the operating room stopped him. He watched as his son was taken inside, the doors swinging shut with a heavy thud. And just like that, the wait began. He sat in the waiting room, the clock on the wall ticking painfully slow. Each minute stretched into an hour, each hour into eternity. His chest felt hollow, his breath shallow, his hands clenched into fists that trembled no matter how hard he tried to steady them. Lily, the kind nurse, brought him a cup of water. These surgeries take time, she said softly. No news is good news. But Keanu barely heard her. His mind was in that operating room, replaying his son's words, the wish that had broken him. I just want to see you smile again. He stood up, pacing the room, his steps restless. At times he whispered prayers under his breath, words that stumbled out of him without thought. At times he stared at the floor, his mind drowning in fear. Hours passed. Once a doctor emerged briefly to give an update. The procedure is delicate, but we're making progress. Keanu nodded, but the words felt thin against the weight of his dread. He sat down again, covering his face with his hands. For the first time in years, he felt utterly powerless. Money, fame, recognition, none of it mattered here. None of it could guarantee the life of a child. All he had was hope, fragile and trembling. A memory returned suddenly. His son as a toddler, laughing in the park, chasing after a kite that barely flew. Keanu remembered his smile that day, bright, carefree, untouched by pain. And now that same child lay on a table, his life hanging in the balance. Tears slipped through Keanu's fingers as he whispered to himself, "Please don't take him. Please." Another hour passed, then another. The waiting room grew colder, emptier until only Keanu remained, pacing back and forth like a man trapped in a cage. Finally, after what felt like an endless night compressed into one day, the doors opened. A surgeon stepped out, his mask lowered, his eyes tired. Keanu's heart froze. He couldn't breathe. The doctor paused, then spoke slowly. "The surgery was successful. He's weak, but he made it through." Keanu collapsed into the nearest chair, his hands covering his face as sobs broke free. They weren't tears of sorrow this time. They were tears of relief so raw it shook his entire body. The doctor placed a hand on his shoulder. "He'll need time, care, and strength. But he has a chance now." Keanu nodded through the tears, whispering, "Thank you. Thank you." When he was finally allowed to see his son, the boy lay unconscious but breathing steadily, the machines humming softly around him. Keanu sat beside him, taking his small hand again. "You kept your promise, champ," he whispered, his tears falling onto their joined hands. "You fought." And for the first time in years, Keanu smiled. Not the smile he wore for the world, but the one his son had begged to see. The fragile recovery. The surgery was over, but the battle was far from finished. Keanu knew this the moment he saw his son after the operation. The boy was breathing. Yes, and that alone was a miracle. But he looked so small beneath the sheets, his face pale, his body weak, like a fighter who had survived the first round but was still far from victory. For the first few days, every sound in the room made Keanu's heart race. The beeping of the monitors, the shifting of his son's breath, even the sudden footsteps of a nurse, all of it carried the weight of fear. He barely left the bedside, his hand resting on his son's as though his presence alone could anchor the boy to life. Lily, the nurse, often stopped by to check on them. She never stayed long, but she always left a word of encouragement. Sometimes a smile, sometimes a prayer. "Recovery is fragile," she said one evening. "There will be good days and difficult days. Don't lose hope when the difficult ones come." Keanu nodded, though in his heart he dreaded those days. And soon they arrived. On the fourth night, as rain beat against the windows again, his son stirred in discomfort. His breathing quickened, shallow and uneven. Alarms began to sound on the monitors and nurses rushed in. Keanu stood frozen for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest, his breath caught in his throat. "What's happening?" he demanded, his voice trembling. "His body is struggling to adjust," a doctor said firmly. "This is not unusual, but we need to act quickly." Keanu stepped back as they worked, his chest aching as he watched strangers surround his son, adjusting tubes, administering medicine, calling out instructions. He wanted to scream, to push them aside and hold his child, but he knew he had to trust them. He turned to the wall, pressing his forehead against the cold surface, his hands clenched into fists. "You promised me," he whispered through tears. "You promised you'd fight. Please don't stop now." Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the monitors steadied, and the boy's breathing slowed again. The room quieted, the tension easing slightly. "He's stable," the doctor said at last. But these setbacks are possible. He'll need time. Keanu collapsed into the chair, his hands trembling, his eyes wet with tears of both relief and exhaustion. When the doctors left, he sat back down beside his son, gripping his small hand again. "You scared me, champ," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Don't ever do that again." The boy opened his eyes faintly, his lips curving into the smallest smile. "Sorry, Daddy." Keanu laughed softly through his tears, brushing his son's hair back. "Don't you apologize. You just keep fighting. That's all I ask." The days that followed were a mixture of light and shadow. Some mornings, his son managed to eat a little, his small appetite slowly returning. Other times, he slept almost endlessly, too weak to stay awake. Every smile was a victory, every cough a reminder of the fragility of life. One afternoon, when the boy was awake and stronger, he whispered, "Daddy, I heard the doctors. They said I might not make it. Is that true?" Keanu's chest tightened. He wanted to lie, to shield him. But his son deserved truth wrapped in hope. "It's true they're worried," he said softly. "But I believe in you more than anyone. You've already shown them how strong you are." The boy looked at him with tired but bright eyes. "Then if I make it, will you promise me something?" Keanu leaned closer. "Anything. Promise me you won't spend your life being sad. Promise me you'll help kids like me, the ones who don't have anyone to fight for them." The words pierced Keanu's heart. His son's wish was bigger than his own pain. Even in his weakness, he thought not just of himself but of others. Keanu kissed his forehead gently, tears brimming in his eyes. "I promise. Whatever happens, I promise." And as the boy drifted back to sleep, Keanu knew that this promise would shape not just their tomorrow but the rest of his life. The smile weeks passed. The hospital room that once felt heavy with fear began to carry a softer rhythm. The machine still hummed. The nurses still checked in every few hours, but the sharp alarms no longer echoed through the nights. Instead, there were small victories. Sophie's, giggles returning, soft meals eaten without struggle. The boy sitting up on his own, even if only for minutes at a time. Keanu never left his side. He became part of the room, part of the heartbeat of recovery. He read stories aloud, told jokes, even brought small drawings fans had once given him, placing them on the walls to bring color to the sterile space. Slowly, the boy's strength returned, and with it came light. One morning, the boy opened his eyes with more energy than Keanu had seen in months. His voice was faint but steady. "Daddy, are you happy?" The question caught Keanu off guard. He looked at his son, his throat tight. "Yes," he whispered. "I'm happy." The boy studied him carefully, as though searching for something deeper. Then smile, a real smile, the one I asked for. Keanu felt the weight of that memory, the heartbreaking wish spoken weeks ago in the dark when his son had said he just wanted to live long enough to see his father smile again. This time, Keanu didn't hold back. His lips curved into a smile, not forced, not worn like armor, but soft, bright, genuine. It was the smile of a father who had walked through despair and found hope again. Tears filled the boy's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "That's it," he whispered. "That's the smile." Keanu bent down, pressing his forehead gently against his son's. "And you gave it back to me. You kept me alive as much as I kept you alive." As the days turned into weeks, the boy's recovery became a story the doctors whispered about with awe. "He's stronger than we imagined," one said. "His will is carrying him." Lily, the nurse, told Keanu quietly one evening, "I've seen many children in this ward. Some fade, some fight. But your son, he's teaching all of us what hope looks like." Eventually, the day came when the doctors gave permission to go home. The machines were removed, the wires detached, leaving only the steady rhythm of a young boy's heart beating on its own. As they wheeled him out of the hospital, reporters waited, cameras ready to turn their private journey into a headline. But this time, Keanu didn't shy away. He stood proudly beside his son, who sat in the wheelchair, a blanket across his legs. A reporter shouted, "Keanu, how did you stay strong through this?" He looked at his boy and smiled. "Because he asked me to. Because he reminded me that real strength isn't about never falling, it's about fighting to stand again. He taught me that." The crowd went silent, touched not by fame, but by the simple truth in his words. Later, at home, when the cameras were gone and the world had quieted again, father and son sat together on the porch. The boy leaned against him, small but stronger. "Now, Daddy, will you keep your promise, the one you made to help kids like me?" Keanu nodded, his hand resting gently on his son's shoulder. "Yes, we'll do it together. Your fight will help others fight too." The boy smiled softly. "Then I'm glad I lived for this." Keanu wrapped his arms around him, pulling him close, his tears falling not from sorrow but from gratitude. "And I'm glad you lived to give me back my smile." That night, as the stars shone above, Keanu Reeves realized his son's wish had come true. Not just for him, but for both of them.